I'll give you guys 5 seconds. Can you spot the Hamza in this chaotic image here? The keen-eyed amongst you might have noticed, but there I am with my arms up in the talk. And we will get to how I got into this mess in a moment. So my name is Hamza Buhari, and I have lived a pretty exciting life that I'm willing to share with you today. The title of my talk is The Generalist Advantage, and which is basically seeing the world through multiple perspectives. And we'll go through how that can be an advantage by way of reflecting on my personal experiences. So in 2013, I came to Scotland for university. Did 4.5 years in Aberdeen, then moved to Stirling for a year of pharmacist training. Then I moved all the way up north to Orkney, where I did 1 year of working as a pharmacist. I then moved back home to Nigeria for 2 years, where I ran a plastics recycling business. I came back to Orkney because I couldn't stay away for another year in 2021, and then moved down to Edinburgh for 2 years, still working as a pharmacist. And since October, I've been here in Edinburgh. And I've learned a number of things that we will cover. A few years ago, I came by this book, Range, which basically solidified my understanding of the kind of life I'd been living. It provided some scientific evidence to show that there was some method to the madness, and there are some scientific benefits to being a generalist. I have always been a naturally curious and adventurous person, and this is how I've sort of ended up in all the walks of life that I've ended up in. As we mentioned, AI and automation is sort of the key term of the 21st century. And as AI gets better at doing individual and distinct tasks, the question is there any benefit in being a jack of all trades? And I'm here to argue that there is. So we'll go through some of my hobbies and one by one and interests in general. So firstly, I'm a boxer. I've done boxing, and in fact, I've had 7 fights. I've won 6 of them. And just 2 weeks ago, I became the British University's novice heavyweight champion, representing UCL. And I got into boxing because I watched a Muhammad Ali documentary, which really inspired me, and also because I wanted to lose weight. And I ended up losing 40 kilos by way of boxing. One of my main learning points through boxing is that you can learn a lot, especially motor skills, just by observing the best in the field. And a lot of the information will be kind of absorbed passively. Another thing that I learned basically through my experiences in boxing is that everything you do, for every action, there is a reaction. And we're in there with an opponent, you must be constantly constantly kind of watching. And it's the same for life in general as well. I'm also a stand-up comedian. I've done a couple of shows. I got into it because I've always been the class clown, the class joker, and I thought, why not give this a try and see how it works out. I also thought about the practical benefits of being a stand-up comedian, which is that if you stand up in a group of people and try to make them laugh, other public speaking scenarios might be easier, and this has actually been the case. In terms of what I've learned that stories are an excellent vehicle for encapsulating your ideas and tales. And even if you want to give a simple story, for example, look at what the professor did. By encapsulating his story through Josh, we were immediately engaged. And this is something I had personally learned mainly through stand-up comedy. Another learning is the power of vulnerability and being open. Often, if you are vulnerable with people first, you'll make a quick connection, and humans across all spectrums of life respond to you just showing them a bit of your humanity. Now, this is sort of one of my loves. This is called the Orkney Bar. It's a game, it's a centuries-old game. It's an ancient ball game played only in the island of Orkney. And it is a ball game, 2 teams. There are 200 men on each team. There are no rules, no referee, and the goal is to get the bar to your side by any means necessary. Yeah? The longest game lasted about 8 hours. So it's a pretty chaotic affair. But there are some things that I've learned about this. I am proud to say that I'm an uppie, part of the uppie team. And this is some of me and my amigos walking down to cause some manner of havoc in the city. As you can see, these are barricades in the background here. Sorry, there are some barricades in the background because the entire city is our playing field. So people have to barricade their homes so we don't smash their windows and their doors. And another thing is, across the spectrum of players, you have people from all walks of life. you've got scientists, you've got joiners, and all of us sort of put aside our differences to get stuck in. And one of the most important things that I have learned is that in my first game ever, I had a panic attack, and it was really bad. It was a trauma. It was it was a pretty bad experience. But with the help of my teammates, I overcame it during the game, and I resolved from that point on that in every game I play, I will be at or near the front. And this is not because I am brave or courageous. Actually, it's because I'm afraid of having that experience again. But then there's a question, which is, what is courage if not action in the face of fear? Another thing I've learned is as we go through the trials and tribulations of playing this game, people get injured, there's blood often, things happen, but people always appreciate kindness. And even though we're opponents and we're vicious to each other, people from the opposing team always appreciate when you're kind. So always remember, no matter how hectic and chaotic things are, kindness is always remembered. I'm also a member of the UCL debate team, which is one of the best debate teams in the country. I joined in October, and in my first tournament, actually, we won the bronze finals at Imperial College. And this is my teammate Zachary here. I've partnered with a few of the other debaters in the team. We've debated in Cambridge and other places across the country. And I sort of wanted to debate just to get a bit more intellectual agility, to be able to articulate my thoughts better and to have some more confidence in public speaking. But one thing I did learn is that it is easier than you might think to see things from other people's perspective. And if you put in that effort, you'll be rewarded greatly in life just by being able to put yourself in the shoes of others. And that is something that I've learned greatly from debating. You also learn about techniques of persuasion, both when speaking to a crowd and when speaking to individuals as well. I'm also a lover of the game of chess. Here you can see a lot of my opponents and some scenarios of me in tournaments. I started playing chess actually because I wanted to defeat my dad. He claimed to be the best chess player in our postcode, a fact that I did not agree with. I spent some time, and I'm happy to say that argument has now been settled because I am currently in the top 1% of like amateur chess players on chess.com. I don't know if you know about that. And I played in chess tournaments across Scotland, and I'm hoping to play some more in England as well. Some of my main learning points from the world of chess is simply that there is always a best move. Regardless of your situation in life, no matter how bad things are, technically you can forget the past and assess going forward what is the next single best step I can take. And that is something you have to do in chess. And often you are rewarded when the tides turn. As you can see here, I'm holding a book called How to Be Lucky in Chess, which is almost paradoxical because chess is a game of perfect information. So how could you be lucky? Well, it is by making sure you control what is in your hands to the best of your ability. Another thing I learned from chess basically is something I knew in theory, but I learned in practice. There is an ancient Greek philosopher by the name of Solon, who was one of the founding fathers of Athens, and he said that nobody is happy until the end is known. And until the end, you are merely lucky, but not truly happy. And this is something that is clear in chess. You might play a game for 4 hours, winning, having a good time, and with one move, you can squander it all. And the same is of life. Until the end is done, until that check is signed, as it were, do not celebrate too early. I'm also a lover of nature. These are some of the vistas I was rewarded with for living in Orkney. In fact, this here is perhaps my single favorite spot on earth. It is an 8-mile, very isolated solo walk, and I could spend 3 or 4 hours up there. And it's just so refreshing to the soul to be in nature. And often when you're living in a city, you forget about it. But I do encourage you to spend more time outdoors and touch grass, as they say. But one thing I learned, basically, it's a question that I asked myself while being there all by myself alone there, which is, what would you do if nobody could see you? You see, the joy of being in nature is so pure that you would do it without needing to post it on Instagram. But ask that question about other affairs in your life. Would you wear the same clothes? Would you go to the same university if really nobody else on earth could know? Would you even have the same partner if nobody else could know, by way of signaling? And I found that to be a profoundly philosophical question. I'm also a lover of the dance floor. You're lucky I'm not dancing here, to be honest, but wherever there's a dance floor, I like to go and engage. And this has been the case from when I was a very young boy. One of my greatest learnings from being on the dance floor is the power of non-verbal communication, which is in an environment where you cannot talk, it is still possible to break the ice and make a pretty strong connection just by smiling, maintaining strong eye contact. And that is something that I think often people forget. Another thing I've learned from being in a number of dance floors is people gravitate towards confidence. And if you want to have a good time in a novel, in a novel experience, if you just even pretend you're confident, you'll find people coming towards you for reasons that might be difficult to explain. Um, I'm also a lover of reading. I have an audiobook library of more than 270 titles in fields as far flung as literature, historical fiction, psychology, personal development, philosophy. I try to cover all physics, and I have listened to a total of 6,000 hours, which is the equivalent of reading a 250-page book 1,000 times. And the most important thing I've learned really from kind of all of this varied learning is that the best kind of learning is the learning which enables you to ask better questions, not to give better answers. Because that is what, again, sets humans apart from AI. ChatGPT can give you all the answers, but can you ask the questions? And that's what I think reading can do for you. Another benefit is, just being well read helps you connect with people very easily because you're likely to know something that somebody else knows. So I have some sort of general reflections about my journey in general. The first is being a generalist puts you at a near constant psychological advantage in new scenarios. Because for you, newness is not new. The new thing is just another thing. So generalists have an advantage there. Another is just the true power of empathy and human connection. In every domain of life, people do appreciate that human touch. And wherever you go, it's probably the most important skill, which is how quickly and easily are you able to connect with a fellow human being. Something that will be more important as we get into a world where AI is better and better at the other things. Now, here's a good question. Why should you be a generalist? The first is Nobel Prizes. So evidence has shown Nobel Prize winning scientists are 22 times more likely to be engaged in other hobbies and pursuits outside their primary field of research than non-Nobel Prize winning scientists. Again, the reasons for these we'll cover in a bit. Another benefit is, just think about it, being a generalist puts you in contact with many different domains. And this contact with many different domains means that you are uniquely suited to solve problems by way of analogical thinking, because you can draw solutions from one field into another. And in the book, they spend chapter upon chapter discussing how great scientists like Johannes Kepler, even Einstein, have been able to come to groundbreaking conclusions by way of comparison and method of analogy. Being in different groups also means you're likely to be good at networking, because you're forced to practice the skill of making new connections. You're forced to learn to speak, to quote Shakespeare to your poet friends, and to quote Sun Tzu to your military friends. So as a generalist, you being in so many different friend circles, in time of need, you are likely to know a guy. Another benefit is that of creativity. One definition of creativity is simply the ability to draw connections where others do not see one. And again, with a lot of connections, that is another benefit. And finally, the benefits of generalism are uniquely seen in leaders and leadership, because your capacity to empathize with and connect with human beings is beneficial as a leader. And if you have a pretty broad general base of knowledge, you are likely to know a lot about basic stuff, and that can help you lead teams of even specialists. Now, what are some practical steps you can take, short of launching yourself into a crowd of humanity like I did? The first is consider the long-term vision of yourself. Simply, who do you want to be in 5, 10, 15, 20 years? Not necessarily what do you want to be doing, but what kind of person do you want to be? And if your question is, I want to be in a leadership capacity of some sort, then there are some skills that are beneficial for leaders across the board: communication, critical thinking, empathy, and this can guide your choice of hobbies or interests that you may want to pursue. Another step is to do what's called a time audit. Simply, we all have 168 hours in a week. Do you know how you account for every one of those hours? If you do a good audit, you might find there are 10, 15 hours of extra time that you could spend on more activities and hobbies. Another practical step is just to remember the 80-20 rule, which is a rule, in economics, to say that 80% of the results are gained from only 20% of the inputs. And I'll give you an example. So I went to 6 public speaking seminars, and at each seminar I had only 2 minutes of speaking time. And with this total of 12 minutes of speaking time, I gained the confidence to stand up and speak in any room, be it ask a question or introduce myself or whatever. So you can see how disproportionate the results are. Because one might argue the main benefit of public speaking seminars is just to have that confidence to stand up. Everything else is almost a secondary benefit. Lastly, I would encourage you to be kind to yourself. There is a quote from the first personal productivity guru, Arnold Bennett, who wrote a book called How to Live on 24 Hours a Day. And what he said was the chief beauty about the constant supply of time is that you cannot waste it in advance. Whatever you do, you cannot waste tomorrow's time until tomorrow. And I think that's a very hopeful message to bear in mind if you do choose to pursue this life, which I strongly recommend that you do. So, to conclude, I've sort of walked you through my own personal experiences. I've given you some experiences from and lessons from the book, which I highly recommend you pick up if you want to learn. And just on a personal note, I really do recommend that you sort of put on this hat of generalism. It is an active life where you will often end up in trouble. Your schedule will often be full. You'll often find yourself living at the seat of your pants because you're at the edge of your capacity. But to sort of paraphrase John F. Kennedy, I choose to be a generalist, not because it is easy, but because it is hard. And in the pursuit of hard things is when we gain personal development. And with that hopeful message, my friends, I will leave you. Thank you very much.